Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dream Big podcast with Bob Goff and friends. This is Scott Schimmel, the co-host, and I'm here with my pal, Bob Goff.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're having a terrific week, and I can't wait to dig in today.
Well, Bob, I can't count how many times I've experienced setbacks. I've been dumped, I've been fired, I've been rejected. It seems like that's kind of par for the course at this point in my life.
Yeah, it's like a country western song, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it could be.
Almost like every day that ends with the letter Y has a setback in it.
It's funny because I have 3 kids, and my 5-year-old the other day for the first time, she said, "Daddy, what do you do at work all day?" And I thought about, I could tell her about emails, meetings, proposals I write. And I looked at her and said, "You know how you have to clean up your mess in your room every night?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "That's what I do all day long.
Yes.
I just clean up messes."
Yes, you make them and you clean them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a beautiful cycle. But so all the more reason to figure out, are there patterns that are getting you in,
Totally.
kind of setting you up for setbacks? And are there solutions that have been effective for getting you out or dealing with the aftermath of a setback?
Yeah. And you're no stranger to setbacks in your
Oh,
life.
man, they just always are happening. I remember when I printed one of these books that I wrote, I got it from the publisher. I opened up the package. I was so excited about it. I'm not kidding you. It was printed upside down and backwards.
Oh my gosh, really?
In the cover. I was like, I couldn't even read the end because it was like, that was upside down and backwards
No
too.
way.
And they weren't pranking me. It was just like somebody just messed up.
Yeah. Strike
It was
out.
a setback
Foul
for
ball.
them. But what was a setback for them was a bigger setback for me. And so sometimes we have to deal with our stuff, and we have to deal with other people's stuff that becomes our stuff. And
Yeah.
so setbacks come in a couple different flavors. They're the self-induced setbacks.
Yep.
There's the ones that happen just because life kind of happens around you.
Yep.
And there's other ones where somebody else took a hit, and because they took a hit, you took a hit.
When you think about setbacks, I know you're the kind of guy who tends to push through them, like not to be dragged down. But sometimes, in my experience, there's setbacks that just carry a little bit more weight. They stick with me. So how do you handle that? What do you do with those sorts of setbacks, the ones that really stick?
Yeah, as a 7 on the Enneagram, the hallmark of 7s is we want to coast right over the top.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember in Finding Nemo, remember Dory gives this beautiful instruction. She says, through, not over,
That's good.
when they get to the reef. And over sometimes looks like a better path until you get in there with the jellyfish. And so what I need to do is say, is there something in here for me? And there's a beautiful quote I read that faith that hasn't been tested can't be trusted. And so sometimes I see these things, and I see this in my own faith, that where it's tested, and James is a great resource for that. It's not like a catchphrase, but to say, I think I'm going to be able to lead people better because I've actually experienced this thing firsthand. I've experienced the pain or humiliation or disappointment that surrounds a setback. So if you go over it and you just say like, oh, yeah, I'm over it.
Yeah, right.
That actually, Dory comes to mind, through, not over.
Yeah.
And to say, how do we get through this thing and understand it more completely? The problem for some people is that in going through it, sometimes they camp out in it.
Yeah.
And I think camping out in your setbacks, it might not be as helpful as it might seem.
Well, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, which means when I have a setback, I push through it. I don't mean spent. I just want to fix it. And what I've found, sometimes these cycles, like you were saying, I get stuck in the same setbacks over and over and over again. And for me, it's not about going to camp in it, but I actually need to go back and think about it and process it. And I've had friends talk to me about the grief process. It's like, it's a thing. I thought it's just something that you do when somebody dies. You cry, go to memorial, and get through it. But the grief process, someone told me that anytime you experience a loss or setback, if there's emotion involved, it deserves to be expressed. Otherwise, you'll carry it with you, and you won't even notice that it's in your backpack somewhere.
It's like mercury in a fish. I mean, you just retain it. It never really goes out of your system. And so all the more reason to understand your emotions, to do a little bit of the work that we all need to do to figure it out. And so that you can find a shelf to put this in, and you can go back to your earliest setback. I remember I wanted to be the wake-up fairy. That was the big deal in kindergarten. You've got wings and a wand, and, and when everybody's taking a nap, you go and you like wake them up. You touch the wand on their forehead. Well, I was so excited. I've been waiting all year, and I finally got the nod. I was going to be the wake-up fairy. I got so excited, I stepped on one of these kids' noses. I think I broke it.
Oh my
and
gosh.
So it literally, I only woke up that one person, and they got stripped of my wings and my wand. And so that would be, I was reflecting about what was the earliest setback. It's like, like just getting kicked off the force.
Right.
And so I'm not like traumatized when I see, fairy wings and wands, but to say when you've had something you were so looking forward to and it so didn't turn out the way that you wanted, whether it was a date or a career or whatever your ambition, how do we deal with those setbacks?
Yeah.
Because knowing that they're going to come in every different variety and flavor, and then trusting that these things will not destroy us, but they will actually have the opportunity, if we'll let it, to shape our character.
Yeah.
It's not just all this positivity, like, putting a happy face on. Some of these things just totally stink. You can be wounded. But to understand, it was a friend at Onsite that said it wasn't the rip, it's the repair. And so that whole idea to say, how do I repair this in a beautiful way that could actually serve me, my family, the people I work with, the people I love?
I think one of the gifts I got from my parents was they allowed me to feel things. It wasn't, they didn't call me a sissy if I cried. They just knew that there were certain things that you needed to express emotion. Now that I'm a dad, though, I find that when my kids have setbacks, when they get bummed out, they get rejected, maybe they didn't get the wake-up fairy that they wanted, I want to solve it for them. I don't want them to experience that.
Yeah, you got to keep the rudder in the water, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. I've sailed over to Hawaii a couple times, and there's a sailing event that happens. There's a place called the Molokai Channel, and essentially the water goes from like 6 miles deep to like 6 inches deep in the course of like 200 yards. And so like all the big waves happen right there. It happens right between the island of Molokai and the one just to its left. And so we got into the Molokai Channel. The wind is whipping. The waves are huge. And there's a thing in sailing, it's called a knockdown. And when there's enough wind that hits you along with a big enough wave, the boat knocks down the mast that's supposed to be pointed towards the moon, hits the water.
Wow.
Like you are out of the water.
Yeah.
Your rudder's out of the water. And so the idea about a knockdown is that the sails are still going. And so as soon as the mast hits the water, all the air spills out of the sails. The boat rights itself for a moment. The wind hits the sails again. Boom!
Jeez.
Knockdown all over again. And so we did 11 knockdowns in a row.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody's just hanging on. And I was the guy at the helm. And I'm telling you, that can happen in your life. You just have one thing. You can think of it as a cascade effect, that there's one thing after another after another. And the problem with the knockdown is the rudder's out of the water, so it can't help you anymore. Yeah. And I think sometimes with faith, if you're listening, and that's a big deal, man, that is your rudder. Get the rudder back in the water. And sometimes you need to take down a little sail. You need to take down some sail area and chill out. Right. If you've actually experienced a major setback, to say, this is a little bit more fragile time in my life. The rudder just popped out of the water big time. I'm going to surround myself with some people who are actually knowledgeable, who can get me back on course. I'm going to need to get a little sail area out of the wind. And so take a week off, quit your job, whatever it is that you need to do to surround yourself with wise people, not smart people. They're a dime a dozen. Find wise people. They get your rudder back in the water. They don't tell you what you should do. They tell you who you are.
Well, it's so tempting to isolate yourself when you experience setbacks.
Especially if you're 7, because you don't want to bum anybody out.
Totally.
So what you do is I turtle. I literally head in, tail in, arms and legs in. Like, I'm out. Because I don't want to bum anybody out. But actually, I don't know the psychology of turtles, but I'm still trying to understand myself. But to say, don't turtle. what you need to do is to say, get authentic enough. Authenticity is a great way to deal with setbacks, to say, man, I got no shelf for this, for this relationship that just broke apart, for the loss of an ambition or a dream that you've had for years and years, and say, just get real with yourself. I got no shelf for it. I'm not camping out, but I'm not going to go over. I'm going to go through. I'm going to find some trusted people to go through it with me, people that have gone through things before. And if something pops to you and you're listening and there's something you need to deal with in your past that you just haven't gone through, you've been going over it, find somebody trusting and go through this with them, and to say, let's see where we pop out at the other end. And what you're going to do is you're going to pop out a more whole, authentic, reliable, trustworthy, knowledgeable person. That's a great outcome.
As you've grown healthier, wiser, older, and experienced more setbacks, does that time get shorter, that time of I'm in it, I'm turtling up, and I call a friend? Like, does that get quicker the older you get?
I think I just must be the king of metaphors. I think if because what sprung to mind when you asked that is in Uganda, where we built schools, and particularly during the war with the Lord's Resistance Army, we would put wells in these refugee camps where people were living, 60,000 people, and there's 4 wells to have all of them. Wow. What I learned about wells is this: you drill down, and when you start pumping the water out, at first it's really muddy water because the well is just finding its way to the aquifer. And there's a term it's called a recharge rate. And the recharge rate is all the aquifers start feeding that well. As you start pumping the muddy water out, then it starts recharging. And the thing about wells is the more you use them, the clearer the water gets. I'm like, that'll preach.
That's cool. Yeah.
So in answer to your question, the older I've gotten, the more experiences I've had, and it's not a function of age, it's a function of the recharge rate.
Yeah.
That are you going to continue to pump, or are you just going to walk away and say, I'm out?
Yeah.
And I would say, get back on that thing, and you start pumping that well, and you say, I know it's some muddy water. Me too. It's a little murky. Yeah. But trusting that the more you pump on that, the more you do the important work that you need to do to deal with these setbacks you've incurred, the clearer the water's going to get, the faster that well is going to recharge, and the more that everybody gets what they need.
Reminds me, when I was in college, my roommate and we were the best of friends, but we didn't talk much about deep things. Maybe it was a function of being dudes in college.
I think so.
But he and
it's still a function of being guys.
But over about a year, both of our parents were separated and got divorced. And he and I weren't talking about it. And at one point, I just realized I have to talk about this with somebody. He's the guy I trust the most. And so one night I went to him and said, hey, tonight, when you get back from class, can we have a one-on-one conversation? Can we go out somewhere and have a one-on-one conversation? And we did. And we talked about deep things, talked about the sadness, the grief. And a few months later, when he found out his parents were getting divorced, the first thing he did is he said, I need to have a one-on-one chat with you tonight. And that's over the years become our cue that I need something deeper. I need help. Yes. I'm drowning. And that's been so helpful to send him a text message. Hey, can we have a one-on-one soon? What do you do when you realize you're stuck? Like, who's your go-to person? How do you make that happen? Because flipping from talking about really light, fun things to talk about, especially as a 7, the things that might bum you out might take you a little bit more.
Yeah. So sometimes it's just the transition into the conversation. Why don't you say, let's talk about 2 fun things and 1 hard thing?
Okay.
And so you could say, literally, we can talk about unicorns and we can talk about Ferris wheels, and then let's talk about the most important relationship that you have that just went south.
Yeah.
And so there's a way to do that would actually set the stage instead of all this, like the music changing and all the drama entering in, to just say, hey, listen, this is a difficult thing. I don't access this much, but you can give some ground rules for the person that you're talking to. Say, let me just tell you in advance, I don't need suggestions.
Yeah.
And I don't need like false empathy.
Right.
I just need you to be there and to listen and to understand me more. And that would be great. So let's do 2 fun things and 1 hard thing. You can figure out which one's which.
We'll guess.
And if they actually haven't figured out which one's which, they're the wrong person.
Wrong guy.
Yeah. So find those things. And then also to not compare your pain to somebody else's pain, your setback to somebody else's setback. Because you could say, well, it isn't as bad as theirs. But pain is pain is pain. If Sweet Maria has taught me one thing, it's that. And that God doesn't grade these things on a curve, but this idea of like comparing ourselves to everybody else. Now, empathy is a beautiful way that doesn't involve comparison. That's like entering into, it's going through, not over. But comparison, whether you're comparing your big deal with somebody else's big deal, it will close up your authenticity. You won't want to talk about these things. There's a bunch of guys in high school. We weren't old enough to have our driver's licenses, but we were out of middle school, and so we all had Stingrays. And the big thing when I was that age was who could go the longest wheelie. You know, you get the front wheel up in the air and you pedal just fast enough. You don't tip over backwards, but you don't touch down in the front. And there was one kid that could just go a country mile with this, and I was like, you know, I wanted to do wheelies with him, so I practice and practice and practice. But we finally got together, and I had this thing nailed. I thought I could go 100 yards doing a wheelie. So we're at the same place, and so I pop a wheelie. I'm like 10 feet into this wheelie, and the front tire of my car, of the bicycle, pops off.
Oh my gosh.
And the tire goes. Now I'm doing a wheelie. And the thing about wheelies, at some point you need to come down. And when you come down, you're going to come down hard. Right? And so one of the things to realize is that we're not comparing our things. And what we've all suffered, some setbacks. Some setbacks are going to take a little bit longer before they fully land. Like the setback wasn't having the tire fall off my bike. The setback was about 100 yards from now when that thing came down and I was going to be doing a face plant. And so to be empathetic, some people that are experience a setback, they think they're at the end of the setback. They're actually in the middle of the setback. And so you don't want to complicate the setback by compensating with a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't serve you. Whether you compensate by being like joyful, or I compensate with everything by trying to be funny, and it's just insecurity for all of us. But if you can understand yourself, you know what that is, and to say, listen, put a lid on it, insecurity. I'm just going to have an authentic conversation. It might be helpful for me to talk about two fun things first, but then let's get to the third thing.
Well, this month we're talking all about setbacks. It's just a guaranteed part of life. It's definitely a guarantee if you're a person that's going to pursue your big ambitions. We're talking with Mike Foster, Annie Downs, Ryan O'Neill.
Oh, these are all teachers of mine. I've sat at their feet for years, learning from them. And the kind of authenticity that you'll be hearing from them is the kind of stuff that will lead you forward. Your experience will be different than them, but your the emotions that you felt, you'll identify. You go like, wow, it was a different circumstance for me, but I felt some of those same things of loss and shame and disappointment.
You're in good company if you're experiencing setbacks.
Yeah, that's the one thing that we have in common. It just doesn't work out the way that we hoped it would. And yet, it's our response that is a lot of the demonstration of what God's doing within us and the character that He's building. And the response doesn't need to be this like, well, whatever, it's all going to work out, or some like happy like Hallmark saying. That's over. That's not through. And I think during this series of people that I look up to so much, we're talking about going through that and what did they learn along the way and what are they going to continue to learn. And so I hope for you as you're listening that you'll resonate with some of these ideas, that you won't compare your pain with their pain, but that you'll say, how do I go through, not over these setbacks when they predictably occur.
Well, listen in this month. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. We would love, if you're enjoying this, if you're digging this podcast, that you give us a review on iTunes as well. It's simple. You know how to do it. So, Bob, get ready for a good month.
Oh, it's going to be a good one, you guys. Buckle up.
How you respond to setbacks is going to determine if you have what it takes to accomplish your big dreams. There's no question if you'll experience setbacks. The question is going to be if you're prepared to face them with courage and truth and confidence. That's why this month we have a special giveaway for you. It's a workbook that's going to guide you to make a plan for the setbacks you're going to face. It's filled with exercises you can do on your own or with a friend or a small group, and we really want you to have it. There's a link to it in the show notes. Also, did you know that this fall we're doing more Dream Big live workshops? We just can't stop. We're going back to on-site in Nashville. Again, it's October 11th through 14th. And then to Atlanta, October 22nd and 23rd. We really think there's no better investment that you can make in your big dreams than to get together with a bunch of other dreamers to dig through the framework that we have with Bob as your guide. Get all the information you need and sign up soon to reserve your spot at dreambigframework.com. That's dreambigframework.com.